Hey guys, it is Friday, October 14th, and today I'm here doing a construction video for Lady Aiyana and Holt of the Mercenaries, but this is actually for my Cygnar army. Now this is Holt here, and he carries two pistols and does a lot of cool killy stuff. And this is Lady Aiyana, and she has some magical abilities that both protect her and Holt and also do some damage. But this is for my Nemo list. I'm going to try a 50-point battle tomorrow with Cygnar against Circle. And the idea is that with Arlen Strangeways, a Journeyman Warcaster, and Lady Aiyana, I'll have my 3 spells per turn for Nemo's Arcane Accumulator. So between that and a Squire, there should be a ton of focus. So here, this is just my construction, what I normally do for a model. And I've showed you guys this before, but I wanted to do it again with some newer models. Right now I'm just looking for and finding mold lines from the casting process. And I tend to hit it once forward with the blade to knock down the chunks if there are any. And then, as you can see, I'll actually scrape the blade across the surface, usually light, because you don't want to take off too much, and you can do as many passes as you need to. Now, some people use files for this process. I find that the X-Acto knife works fine for me if you're careful, and you can really just drag it across the surface backwards if you can access it, and it gives you a nice, smooth, shiny finish. Now here I'm doing the same thing with Holt, and Privateer generally does a good job with mold lines. There are some older Games Workshop products that are nightmares to work with, but these products, for the most part, are pretty easy to clean up, and it's good that you have to look this hard sometimes to find the mold lines. So Holt has a little dangle coming under his arm, and then the hardest spots to get to are right here under his arm and also on his collar, just because you want to make sure that you're not taking out any of the detail of the edging or piping that he has along his cloak. But the models are very nice, and if you've worked with Privateer press models before, they've got so much detail, it's a joy to build them and paint them. But here you can see I'm working on the collar and just trying not to take any detail out while I'm at it. The place where this really shows is if you're doing washes. If you're just painting a model with flat colors, it doesn't stand out as much, but the second you try to run a wash over it or do some dry brushing, it'll pick up on the mold line so much. So I'm just cutting stuff out. This is the other thing I do here with the bases that is maybe a little too maybe I care too much. I look at the bases, and usually with these bases of any kind for these games, there's a mold point actually on the perimeter of the circle. So just like the model, I knock it down with a forward cut, and then usually just carve it smooth by dragging the X-Acto blade across the surface. And again, this is another finishing thing that once, because I paint my bases all the way out, I paint and underneath before I seal it, just so I don't get any chips on the edge. But here's a test fit, and I like to do this mostly to check for gaps, because if there's going to be gaps to fill on the end when I go to do my basing, I want to know ahead of time so I can set that up right now before anything's glued in. And I also like to check like that underneath the base, because sometimes those pour tabs come beyond the base, so you need to clip them clean. And here I'm just doing the same with Holt, really just checking my gaps on either side. Now, if there were gaps, there's a couple methods. The toothpick method is easy. Toothpicks fit in there pretty well. I tend to use pieces of sprue and carve them down to fit. And then at this point, before doing any other further joints, I usually glue the models to the base just so I have a strong handhold. Now, Lady Aiyana is one complete model, which is fantastic. If you look closely, she's actually got her hands pulling back her hood of her cloak, which is a pretty awesome pose. Now, this is Holt here, and he obviously doesn't have his two pistol hands. And actually, it's from his elbows to the guns. So what you're looking at is just above his elbows. So I'm just pinning these. They come with nubs that fit in fine. I don't trust them. I talked about pinning before. So really, I just I cut the nubs off and then I pin both arms. And it doesn't have to be that deep. My general rule for if it's deep enough is just to let go, support, but let the weight of the pin vise hang in there. And if the pin vise holds itself up, it's usually deep enough. So I do that on all the joints, and it really just helps with the stability. If you're very careful with your models and you don't transport them much or have a nice traveling case, the pinning isn't going to serve you necessarily. But I found that since I travel a lot over to Paul's or to the game stores, and I travel up north to play with family and friends up there, I find that this precaution is totally worth my time because, forget about fixing chip paint if a limb comes off. It's really nice that I don't have to worry generally, especially with infantry size models. If these things fall off the table onto the floor, I'm not looking at a broken model, maybe some chip paint. But these joints are really strong if you do them correctly, which is, if you pin it like this and then you go back and fill that gap with the glue and then reattach the arm. Another thing I try to shy away against is using zip kicker on pin joints, because zip obviously makes the joint dry very quickly, harden very quickly, but it usually also makes the joint a little brittle. And if you use the same, I use the GW pin vise bits. If you use that with jumbo, I use Office Max jumbo smooth paper clips. I have 100 count clip. They fit really tight. They're perfect for the pin vise. So once you get them in there, you don't really need to go back and worry about it falling. You can just let the glue dry naturally, which is what I encourage on a pinned joint, just to make it that much stronger. So this is how I do my bases. I use Elmer's glue on the base itself, and then search my slate bins, just because slate is a feature I use in all of my War Machine bases. And then I just dab the Elmer's glue into the spots, into the base that's not covered by the model itself. And the process is simple with that. I just use an old ratty brush and spread the glue around. Now, you'll find if you wait too long, the glue itself will start to pool a little bit. Just spread it around, but you really don't have more than 3 or 4 minutes until the Elmer's glue starts to get too thick to work right. So then I just drop a piece of slate on and into the spot that's got enough glue. Finish up the back, and then I have playground sand, and you can use any kind of sand. I just happened to buy a bag of purified children's playground sand, and I've gone through maybe a coffee can worth of it since I got it 5 years ago. So you really don't need a whole bag. Maybe go into it with some friends, but it gives you this really nice fine grade stuff. And once you have your glue put down, it really just takes a small dip. You can use the cap of a soda bottle. I use the lid to my basing supplies, like the medium bases that you just saw. And you take the model, and it's real simple. I just put it in there and I swirl it around. It's not complex. Tap it off. And then the key is, before that glue starts to get stringy, just take your finger and rub it around the high point. This works really well on privateer models, but if you're careful, you can do the same with any kind of GW 28 mils. So you just go around the edge, and I try to make it, just rub it until the raised part of the base is what your resistance is, and not the pieces of sand around it. So it's a really simple process, but it makes for really effective models. And I'm glad you guys watched tonight. I hope this was helpful, and I'll be back tomorrow. I'll see you then. Have a good night, guys.